Hello.
Howdy.
All right. Last day, winding down. There's beers in the lobby. I have mine already to get a little relaxation, not be so nervous. We're going to be talking about AEM implementations and looking at it for not just getting your AEM installed and up and running, but looking more at the technology and the user journey. Let's see. The first thing is you guys are here, so we know you're invested. Most of you probably already have an AEM install if you're considering it. What we're going to do is we're going to take you through the process around technology and things to consider, but we're actually going to focus more on the user journey and how that is going to make your implementation successful. Just to introduce ourselves.
Sure. So my name is Paul. I'm EVP of Technology at 3Share. As many of you know, I generally, whenever I come to San Diego, try and stuff myself with as many tacos as possible. And I think we share that love for tacos. But I live in DC, so I spend a lot of my time planning vacations around what I will eat or where I will drink. And that led us to this sort of concept, I think, that we'll be sharing with you.
And I'm Kristin Jones. I'm a managing partner with 3Share. I do love to do tons of research and plan trips and eat tacos when I'm on those trips. And I'm currently living in London. And as we go through the presentation, we're going to be, instead of just making up some use case or some user profiles, we decided to use ourselves. So as we go along, you'll see that we'll be jumping into, where Paul and Kristin are in our taco finding, sunshine finding journey.
Yes.
Okay, so one thing I do want to say is that this is not going to be about how to run your project. I think we've had some really great presentations on, how to have a strong kickoff, and there's many project manager blogs out there, as well as a lot of wonderful resources here in the room that know how to run projects really well, and that is certainly a key part of making sure that your implementation goes well. But what we really want to focus on is the journey and the data and analysis and all the other pieces that you need to be thinking about in order to get to where you want to be. And then just at a high level, if you're going to be part of the Adobe Experience Cloud, you already know you've invested in licenses, so you also need to invest people and time. And you need to give those people the time and the capacity to actually, plan, measure, think about key performance indicators. There's many projects where we'll get to a kickoff and we'll talk about the project goals. And there's a lot of folks who still don't even have a good baseline of understanding what data they already have and how they can convert that into something more measurable and meaningful, and have their, actually have a measurable results for their user journey, and then actually have a goal for how they can actually take advantage of the AEM stack, and versus just having a nice website.
Yeah, just to add it quickly, I think one of the things that we hear a lot, especially just being generally project focused for most of the time that we're working. Oftentimes we see that the actual launch of a website seems to be like the end goal, whereas it's not really seen as the first step in testing whether you know anything about your users at all. And so I think a key focus for the next 31 and a half minutes will be how you view that first MVP launch as really your gateway to more data about your users and being able to optimize their experience.
So let's begin our journey. So in the beginning, there's a company called Taco Flight, and they have a vision, and they need to start preparing for their AEM implementation. They do a business selling packaged culinary trips to San Diego. How convenient. And they have invested in AEM and want to update their user experience. They want to start their digital transformation journey, and just want to do a little bit of a note there. So digital transformation feels like a pretty big word, kind of an industry term that we've all been hearing a lot of. And it's a great term. And the one thing that I have noticed, though, is that companies will try to do a digital transformation all at once. So they're going to, invest in the whole AEM stack, and there might be doing other projects in parallel, such as revamping their e-commerce platform or putting in a product database, and that's great. But think about, if we do this all at once, do I have the resources? Do I have the capacity to do it well? So we want to take you through a more phased approach of that digital transformation, and we think doing it that way and taking time to measure and analyze actually will get you to where you want to be faster and more scalable. So for Taco Flight, as they do this journey, they want to use the insights and data that they have and the insights and data that they want to gather in order to increase their bookings and traffic on their site.
And so a big part of this process, at least to me, is that you start out any sort of project with a ton of assumptions. And some of those assumptions are what guide us as a consulting company to determine how to scope a project or to get to that MVP launch. But in general, you're going to start out with a lot of assumptions about your users. You may have a site already. You may have a set of metrics that you've been measuring your success against. And again, those are all assumptions, but with each release of a project, but really a product, you gain insight. And so you kind of see this sort of inversely proportional relationship where as you have more data, then you can make more meaningful changes to your site, but also you can assume less about your visitors.
Okay, so we're starting our journey as Taco Flight, and we need to make a plan. So day 0. So 2 tracks that kind of should be running in parallel is your technology track and then your user journey track. The technology is going to be, the things that you have to do. You've got to get AEM installed. Maybe you're starting out with Analytics and Target, so you're going to get those integrated, maybe Adobe Launch hooked in there as well. We do know we're going to do a new website because we're rebranding, so we do know that there's baseline templates and components that need to come out of that. So that's the basics of your technology journey. And then as you evolve over time, you want to start planning for when you might want to take an upgrade, plan for a service pack, or as you tie it into your user journey, you're then going to want to start adding in, hey, we want to invest in Adobe Campaign now, and we don't need to do that until Q4 because we're not going to be in our, ready to handle that as part of the user journey yet. And so the user journey is, profiles such as, Taco Flight wants to get more people to come to San Diego and do their taco culinary experience. And so, they're going to be mapping out what it is that they want someone to do when they come to their site, the conversions, and that should be happening in parallel all along the process. And the other key thing here is, and also in terms of just, the implementation, there's the project. That's kind of more like the technology, just getting your first site up. But really, this is a product, not only in the Adobe Experience Cloud, but also in terms of what you are trying to accomplish with your customers. So it shouldn't, you shouldn't just limit yourself in terms of what you're trying to accomplish with your site, but always be planning in parallel to the technology implementation. So the other thing too for day 0 is as you're planning, and again, thinking more in a phased approach is MVP. We are, our bread and butter is probably MVPs, getting that first site out the door, and certainly the perfect place to start. And so as part of the key user journey that you want to deliver, you need to start prioritizing what are the ones that you're going to be able to achieve as part of your MVP. And then I really like this graph of high impact, high urgency in terms of those are the things that you should include in your MVP. And then from there you can start reviewing and refining and kind of figure out if there's other ones that should slip in, or those are the next ones that will be part of your future phases. Okay, so like I said, we're not spending a lot of time on the how to do all of this, but so now you've planned your MVP requirements, you started mapping out some of these user journeys, so you're going to get started.
So obviously a key component, the data that you have before you launch any site is just what you've gained from previous experience, previous metrics that you are targeting and tracking on your existing site. And so in a brand new startup, something like Taco Flight, you would probably do some sort of market research to understand what in your industry, what in your specific region is reasonable to track and measure against. So first thing you'd obviously do is you'd have some sort of mock-up of how you want the site to look. But, if you go to the next, you also want to mock up the data that you're going to be tracking along with that site. The idea is that once you launch your site, you're going to have analytics already implemented, and you kind of understand what experiments you'd like to run in the first 3 to 6 months to better understand your users. And so part of that is identifying a gap between the data that you collect and the data that you desire. So a great example of that is like something like a page view metric versus a sort of a funneling analytics metric. So how many people go to the reservations page versus how many people go to the reservations page directly from the bar or the taco bar crawl kind of page. Like that sort of funnel is something that you want to kind of establish right from the beginning of your project. But most importantly, the more data that you gain, it opens up new insights into what you can test for next. So it's almost like if you're a scientist and you have a hypothesis, it's not necessarily bad that you're testing your hypothesis and you weren't right. It just means that you probably have spawned 3 or 4 new hypotheses that you want to test. And so that's kind of the goal behind an initial MVP launch.
So you're now 30 days into your MVP, and it's time to have a checkpoint. There's the traditional, is the MVP on track? Always something that we have to battle with. But are you still planning for your post-MVP? What are the next things that we want to be accomplishing to support the user journey to gather and use the data? And then the other part is, okay, so as we get into the user journey, we're going to be talking about maybe A/B testing. Are we planning content to do that? Do we have different images or different marketing material that we're preparing to support the site when we do get it up and running, so that we can actually use that and have that data in action? So while Taco Flight is working on getting their site up and running, and they're thinking about people like Paul and Kristin in the back of their mind, Kristin wants to get some sunshine. Everyone who knows me knows that. And Paul is craving tacos. So we're brainstorming and we're like, oh my God, you remember San Diego and the tacos? It's like, yeah.
I do.
So I'm like, we should go. So I get online and I start searching for the best taco places in San Diego. And as I'm doing that, a little paid advert comes up on the side, and I see, a package for a culinary trip. I'm like, that's kind of interesting.
So the idea here is that with every single user interaction, you're starting to analyze data. So it makes sense that someone in winter probably wants sunshine and warmth, It also makes sense that if you are visiting a site based off a search engine result, that this person's been searching for a little bit, or at least started a search immediately. You probably know the device that they're using. You probably know if you yourself paid for that ad that drove them there. But all these sort of things we found actually with a lot of clients don't truly know this information, which is somewhat surprising. So then once you launch, there's obviously a couple things that Kristin mentioned, like it's not really just launching a static version of a site, it's truly launching a framework for you to change. So every aspect of the site can change, and again, you have your hypothesis of what will work and what won't, but we find that most clients on day one don't have that solid data layer in place. So I guess that's why we're stressing it.
Okay, so yay, the site's launched, but the job's not over. Like we said, that's really just your foundation. So you're now starting to get analytical events coming in. And now you can start thinking about, okay, from the MVP, what are the gaps? Okay, we're realizing that there are different data points that we could start collecting, or within many situations, you start getting into it and you get new ideas, and by doing a more phased approach, you can flex and change your priorities. So at this point, you might be jumping into a maybe just another technology piece that you want to implement, or you might be digging into your new data and just spending some time doing analysis before you make your next decision. So, analyze, plan, prioritize. So now that the site's up, we can see that Kristin has landed on the site, and she's come back once or twice in the last 24 hours. And she's tracked, or I've done it on, I don't know, third person. Didn't realize that'd be awkward. So I've been on my phone and I've been on my laptop. I let Paul know, and he can't stop thinking about the tacos. And he wants to see the taco shops listed on their taco crawl page. And that's being tracked in his browser history autocomplete.
So some insights there. So obviously repeat visitor, but repeat visitor across multiple devices. So maybe, if you're like me at night, I'm generally searching a ton of things that I thought of all day. But it's more meaningful if, let's say, I search for something on my mobile phone, and then within 10 minutes, I then also search for it on my laptop. That means I mean business. I've now switched from phone to laptop, which means I'm doing actual research. And so things like that are interesting to track. Same with if you notice that you have a metric where some person or people are constantly going through the same exact funnel and then leaving. That's also rather insightful and makes you wonder why either they're leaving or where they go next, and how you can influence that funnel.
Okay, so now you are 30 days post MVP. You have a lot more data.
And so as you have more data, you certainly have more ideas of how to change data. So as Kristin said before, oftentimes there's a sort of a light bulb moment where someone's like, hey, well, we don't think we're doing well enough converting users coming from social media. So let's try something different. But what that person needs to know is that depends on a creative team creating new copy, new imagery. It also creates a set of dependencies on aligning what your goals were, what your initial goals were, versus your goals 60 days in versus 90 days in. So it kind of starts a chain of events to truly understand what your next experiment will be. So what ends up happening, or at least what we see, is now you have multiple entry points. So you have different imagery, you have different content. And as we move from knowing nothing about our users to knowing more. Let's say they're, if Kristin's in London, for example, then maybe focusing on sunshine is a little bit more, it's going to hit home a little bit harder. Versus me, obviously, I'm focused on the food.
Okay, so the site's been out there, it's getting used more. I go back and I'm now checking availability twice on Monday after a long day, not uncommon. And Paul's seen friends post pictures of tacos on Facebook, and he wants to see the availability. So he's getting on, and we're feeding more data into Taco Flight.
So now we start to notice patterns, things like which day of the week are people most likely to search for a trip to San Diego? Or which day of the week are people most likely to, let's just say, blow off work and be focusing on searching Google or 2 o'clock in the afternoon? That sort of thing it has meaning. Same thing with where you're referring website. So oftentimes you can make a lot of decisions based on the fact that someone's coming from Facebook. Not just that they're coming from Facebook, but perhaps you can target even a path from once they've landed from Facebook to a specific page on the site. So just essentially we're just saying that there are these things that most people aren't really thinking about other than the actual page views, metrics, that sort of thing. So again, once you know more about your users, you can start to anticipate their behavior and provide them with information before they even know they need it. So for example, if people are constantly looking for one particular thing, feature that on the homepage. And then on the next slide, similar thing, we can actually simplify them getting to a conversion. So if they're coming from London, pre-populate the airport that you're flying from. If you've selected the dates already, the next time you come back to the site, pre-populate the dates for the same trip. These sort of the idea is to reduce the friction to actually convert.
And the other thing I want to kind of mention is, as part of your AEM implementation and your product, the first slide before this might have been what was out on the MVP release. The Simplify version, this might be the 30 days or 60 days later release where you've now made priority decisions based off of that data in action.
And so lastly, you start to personalize actual content to the point where the site, you are aware as a visitor that the site knows who you are. Whether that, obviously there's the whole balance of whether that's creepy or not, but the idea is that you have content that you kind of already told the website that you wanted to see, and now the website says, okay, sure, I will show you that. So in this case, geolocation, to figure out why someone would want to get away, specific copy based on interests that you've already shown you're interested in, and then tailored imagery that certainly maps to the content, to the copy. Oftentimes we see copy change, but we don't see imagery change, or the experiment being run is simply copy and not related to imagery. So these things are tied, and so the experiments that you can either run them independently or in sort of a multivariate way.
All right, so now we've got a couple releases. We're getting, when I go on, it's, targeted more towards the fact that I am in London and the dates I've been looking for. And so now I actually see a flight from London to San Diego, and my interest is piqued. So I look at the prices, I look at the package, and I'm like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm ready.
And so on the right-hand side, you've seen we moved from, instead of assumptions that we're trying to target or question, we're now strictly gathering data. I mean, we now know where this person's coming from. We know that they've been there a couple times. They know which experience fragment caused them to run down this conversion funnel. And so, again, we have this insight that we can use to optimize for other users that are similar.
So I think I've kind of been repeating this a little bit, but you've got the, 60 days later, you're still got your technology path, and your user journey. And while you're planning your implementation, to keep that in mind and create more of that roadmap. And as you think about your larger digital transformation effort, to try to bring all of those factors of what you're actually trying to get to in mind, and try to do a more phased roadmap in order to really take all of these newer ways to get the data and actually see it in real time. And also with how technology changes over time, it allows you to take advantage of what's new by doing it in a more phased approach.
And so now to differentiate between something that's, I would say, is personalized and something that's dynamic. We often see clients integrate with third-party review sites or social media sites to display information. So I think past personalization, there's this idea of dynamic content. So in this case, Taco Flight's decided to pull in reviews. People just like me are saying that they like Taco Flight, and that might influence my decision. Statistically, it has, and that's an experiment that I think they would probably try and run post-MVP.
Great. So Taco Flight now has the integration with user experience, and Paul sees a review about it by someone in DC. So he goes on and he's checking the dates. He's like, I don't know, I can probably get a better deal than Kristin, so I'm gonna make one more look. But it all lines up, and he's also ready to book.
So we have more data. We're collecting it. I'm sure you're all pretty on the edge of your seat about whether or not we actually book this trip, but I would say it's looking pretty good. And we, again, can identify a pattern in what got us to conversion path. And so I guess that post everything that you're doing, so you're putting out a lot of information, you're testing a lot of your experiments, but there's something to be said about gathering information from others. And so here's this sort of like post-MVP, phase 3 kind of thing where you're utilizing the experiences of others visually to impact similar people. So Taco Flight's decided to add an Instagram integration where you kind of, once you see yourself or people that you want to be doing the thing that you want to do, again, you're more likely to convert. And so within AEM, within the technologies that we support, that often triggers a workflow, some sort of moderation aspect. But the idea is that you're having, again, similar people tell a story for you that you've been telling all along.
So at this point, I think Kristin and Paul are eating tacos in San Diego. At least we will be tonight.
Yes.
Seriously. So we're now going to enter an email campaign. So we're hashtagging pictures of tacos.
So the point here is that even after a person has converted, they become a completely different user. They're someone who has hopefully had a good time doing what they set out to do, and they're sharing that information with others. So in this case, they become part of an email campaign. I'm sure you get a ton of email, but some are better than others. Some are definitely engaging, and some are not. But to give an experience to a person that makes them want to share that experience is pretty impressive. And again, now we're talking about a completely different person. We're talking about perhaps a loyal user. And our journey kind of starts over again. How do we keep this person happy? How do we provide new information that maybe they want to go to Vancouver for sushi? I don't know. It's a spin-off business. I feel like that type of information is, again, it's a completely different set of data that you're trying to collect.
So that really just shows that the possibilities in tacos are endless. And the journey isn't over. Your AEM implementation has been more successful because of the time that you've put into thinking about your roadmap, thinking about who you want coming to your site and how you want them to convert on your site. And so by continuing to put in that research and investing in the people on your team to do the analysis, get really good ideas, and prioritize them, then I think you'll have you'll be much more capable to actually start leveraging more of the Experience Cloud and some of the really cool tools that Adobe's putting out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?